I have terribly mixed feelings about ideas that make their way to Kickstarter or other fan-fun backing schemes. For the most part, I think it is a good idea, especially when it comes to making original concepts based around forms of media. I was one of the few people who actually bought an Ouya when they were released, and as any PC gamer since way back when would be, I'm excited at the prospect of a new Planescape game, but I have this impending worry that it will soon become over-encumbered with people who don't really have the wherewithal to complete their projects regardless of funding. Steam, who in the past have been so reserved with their releases, are putting forward homegrown games every other day it seems. I by no means mean that in a negative way of course. It's good that wannabe game developers have a chance to showcase their work, but I feel all of a sudden overfaced with the amount of games that I have to choose from, which clouds my attention from them in some respect. That was, however, before I became aware of the ever-growing presence of Xenonauts, a game that unashamedly inspires to be the next XCOM, and one invokes XCOM at their own peril. The original XCOM, developed by Microprose, was a glistening gem of ambition, design and gameplay which due to its functional execution is still a blast to play today. The premise is simple: aliens are entering the Earth's orbit and it is up to you to defend our dear planet. What stood this apart from most games at the time was its mixture of tasks you must perform and different game mechanics you had to play through. When you begin, you are given nothing but the world and some money, and as counterintuitive as this is, you are free to start your repelling attacks in any way you wish. Although you won't get very far without building your primary headquarters, which can be situated anywhere in the world you wish. From here you can create adjoining buildings, allowing you to expand in many fields, such as researching and engineering new equipment and items, hiring and managing soldiers, and kitting out aircrafts to ferry around your troops and shoot down UFOs. How you approach all of these aspects is entirely up to you, although that isn't to say that if you don't take a logical approach you won't fail, because you will, and the game does a good job at never holding your hand. It simply sits back and watches you learn from your mistakes as you try again. When you have established a base of operations with means of flight and an army of squaddies, you play the waiting game until the aliens make their first move. It won't take too long until you have intercepted your first invasion and are treated to how we deal with these little scurrying buggers. Encounters take place from the point of your dropship landing in a closed off isometric environment populated with enemies, buildings and obstructions which are all concealed until you cautiously send your squad forth. Manoeuvring and giving actions to your squad is done in turns between you and the invaders, allowing you to move all your units at once as far as you wish within their allotted time points. Each tile move takes up action points, as does everything else including combat and turning. When you finally see an alien you wish to blast away, depending on your character's stats, weapons and placement, you will be generated a percentage rate of success for the attack to hit, to coincide with the amount of action points you have assigned it. More action points can be used for more precise attacks, and characters can also hunker back unspent points in order to perform a reflex shot should an enemy come into view whilst they are stationary and it is the enemy's turn. Once a mission is completed and all of the aliens have been wiped out, we are treated to the spoils of our efforts, which can be sold for cash, used to research better equipment, or used as parts for new equipment. It's a system that is extremely accessible and is still as involving today as it was back then. Some ideas with their rules just travel well. You only have to look at some sports and how long they have been popular for to realise that. So much so that in 2012, Fireaxis released XCOM Enemy Unknown, a faithful instalment of the XCOM franchise, fundamentally unchanged other than a few features to streamline the experience into being more user-friendly and somewhat more cinematic when it comes to combat. Now we are in full 3D with more visual character customization and smarter AI. The game still remains the same. You'll be researching new alien types of weapons, creating different types of armour and battling alien spacecrafts. Only now, everything has more of an inviting approach in terms of user interface and presentation. Previous games in the series had much more of an unfriendly, convoluted approach. There was no real hint as to how to get going or what you really needed to do, and the massive amounts of icons you can click in combat are simply bewildering without an instruction manual. But this is something I actually like. The more a game tells me what to do, the more I feel aware that I am in fact playing a game. When you have to work out exactly what does what, you feel much more engaged knowing that the experience you are having probably is not going to be entirely the same as someone else, even if it's only for a few confused moments at a time. I did think about reviewing XCOM Enemy Unknown or Enemy Within, but as I think it's one of the best games to come out in the past decade, there wouldn't be much to say but praise, so I thought I would review something I have never played before. Xenonauts then, a Kickstarter-backed game trying to tread already loved ground in an unabashed way. How dare you, I thought to myself before buying it instantly. Right off the bat, we are made aware that this really aspires to be an XCOM game without the title. Everything upon first impression is pretty much the same, albeit with its own design aesthetic. And from the get-go we are again left in the dark as to what to do by being thrown right in with only a pocket full of cash and a base to establish. After picking a key location, we are free to explore the many menus the game has to offer us and how they will benefit us throughout. All our familiar friends are here. We have base management, allowing us to construct new additions to our primary base. Research, where we can assign tasks to our scientists in order to invent new items for us to use. Engineering, who in turn can build the new items we research. Squad management, where we can hire and fire soldiers at the cost of nothing. The storeroom, letting us know what materials and resources we have accrued over time. Equipment, where we can change the loadout of our squad of up to 8 people. Vehicle equipment, to kit out any armoured machinery. Aircraft loadout, to buy new crafts and dropships. And finally, the information button, which acts as an encyclopedia of sorts, explaining new items, terms, or aliens we may have encountered. With our established base, we are assigned sort of a starter package, with a pre-picked squad, dropship, and attack ship. Once you are all set up, you are left staring at the geoscape, which by default runs in pretty slow, almost real time. For this reason, there are 3 further speed settings to really ramp up the pace, and using these, as they have always been, are a blessing. After enough random time has passed, a UFO will inevitably enter the airspace surrounding your base, and you will be prompted to either ignore it or engage it. Engaging with aliens is somewhat the point of the game, so sending your fighter planes to intercept will become a familiar and often occurrence as you progress and build up your base. When an aircraft reaches its target, you will have the option to fight it, which you can either tackle yourself or leave it up to the auto-resolved. You can also let the alien go, which you will be doing if the predicted success of auto-fighting is anywhere in the low numbers, or follow it, which, if it is over water when your craft reaches it, is a good option so it crashes on land. When a craft has been downed, we have the boring option to do an airstrike for a quick bit of money, or send out your dropship full of soldiers to wipe out the aliens one by one, and you would be a fool to not do this every time. Ground combat stays true to its pseudo-predecessors by being located in isolated zones of earthly inhabitants, displayed isometrically to create a 3D perspective for your characters to manoeuvre around. How you operate around these sections sits very closely with board game logic. The way your characters move according to allocated tiles and how they can perform what is essentially Overwatch will seem very familiar to anyone who has played something like Space Hulk. Your first big threat here will be the fog of war, as despite your dropship having landed from above, no one seemed to bother to look out of the window on the way down, so your surroundings are completely masked until your troops henceforth. Each one of your characters will have their own set of strengths and weaknesses in form of their stats, and for the most part you will favour characters that have a high number of time units, as these will allow them to travel further and have a better chance of having enough left over after moving to let off a shot should they encounter an alien. Squad members have a directional field of sight that will clear the fog of war, meaning that whatever direction they are facing will uncover a predetermined amount of tile spaces in their arcing field of vision. Every movement your character makes will take up time units, including turning on the spot, so in order to fully unearth your surroundings, you will be making sure that you have enough time units left to do a full sweep around when your character stops. What lurks in the darkness is always hidden from us until you first encounter it, and should your squad member spot an extraterrestrial whilst pottering about, he will stop in his tracks and we will be alerted with an icon allowing us to zero in on its location. Whilst in sight, every team member has the opportunity to take a shot at the alien, and this can be done to greater effect depending on how many time units your character has in their possession. Most all weapons are able to shoot with designated levels of accuracy which take up more time units to do so. Sniper and assault rifles will benefit the most from putting more points into your shots, as this will increase their chances greatly. Close quarters shotgun members have a chance to increase their aim by 1 level, which whilst limited is a trade-off by the scattering nature of the shotgun fire. And heavy gunners only have one choice of fire, and this usually results in all their time units being spent, but they do fire multiple times, which often results in suppressing an enemy. Also, there are certain obstacles scattered throughout each map which can aid you in blocking enemy fire and in turn block yours from hitting them. As most everything here is down to a mathematical formula, the chance of hitting or evading a target is never set in stone, so sometimes a gamble will pay off. Or likewise, you can be struck with a slew of bad luck. Along with moving and shooting, your characters at the cost of 3 time units can kneel down, giving them an increase in hitting targets and avoiding incoming fire, and you can also reserve your time units to fire upon revealed targets, the greater the attack depending on the amount of points reserved. All of this will seem instantly familiar to anyone who's played a previous XCOM game, which only really leaves the one question: how well does it fill Daddy's shoes? Let's start with how the game looks. My first impression was that it looked awfully like something that had been designed with tablets in mind, and the character models displayed in the loadout menu reminded me heavily of something that might have been created using Flash. There is certainly a more disciplined approach to how the game is displayed and interacted with, which has branched away from the more almost darkly comedic comic book style the previous games adhered to. Things seem placed more for their intended functionality and information, and none of it seems arbitrary, which isn't a bad thing at all. The geoscape and places of navigation from here are where you do all of your management, and they've been made rather accessible, if not a little convoluted for a first time player. But I'll be honest, the first time I played it, it took me a while to notice different placements of text. I must have been playing for at least 5 hours or so before I even noticed that there is objectives hidden in the bottom right hand corner. Combat visuals also lie heavily on their function rather than impression. There is little to no animation that happens on characters that aren't currently being used, and as my first mission took place in a field, I was feeling a little bit uninspired with its large amount of copy and pasted tiles. My initial thoughts on the game was that it was certainly lackluster, and I didn't play it again for a few days after the first time, as I did not feel the need to pick it back up again. But when I did pick it back up again, something rather enjoyable happened. I realised that I'd been playing the game for hours without my noticing, and this is a very rare thing for me. It really takes something quite special to have me immersed enough in a game for my mind to not wonder, and after getting over the hump of the first hour or so, Xenonauts certainly accomplished that. I think it might be because you start off with nothing, you are given little for your first impression to cling on to, but once you gain the need to put time into all these game mechanics, you are drawn in unknowingly, due to all of the simultaneous responsibilities. As you encounter more alien ships, the enemies and locations will get more interesting, and for me anyway, I had a complete turnaround with my opinion of the design style. I think it was once I got into towns with buildings that I actually became quite fond of them. They fit to how the game works perfectly, and their non-clumsy approach to characters and structures helps to aid the game in feeling more solidly constructed. After fighting your way through a couple of encounters and acquiring new alien items and money, you'll have new research options open to you. These will range from new armour, vehicles and weapons to understandings of alien technologies, which will in turn open up further branching paths. Everything in the game takes its time, and depending on how many scientists and engineers you have hired and assigned to certain tasks, the amount of time will differ. Hiring new members of staff is capped by the amount of spaces available in your living quarters, which can be built around your main base, and as the game progresses, you'll be wanting to research and build new and exciting weapons as fast as possible, so expanding on your base becomes a necessity. However, there are only a limited amount of spaces free to build in your base, so that will leave you with only one option, to build more bases, which in turn take their time to construct, but can also be kitted out how you wish with their own research teams, engineers, squads and ships. Soldiers can be transferred to and from your built bases, and due to the fact that they gain experience after finishing combat missions resulting in their stats being bolstered, you will find yourself ferrying over a few to help out with a fresh batch of newbies. As time goes by, you will have suited out your main squad with upgraded armour and an array of new interesting weapons. Soldiers mostly come to you as labelled riflemen, but can equip any weapon you wish, allowing you to fully customise them to your own liking. Having snipers seems to work for the most part. Picking new recruits with the best accuracy and time units certainly makes for the most effective long-range combatant, and due to the size and scale of the maps, the distance you will be firing shots at makes them the most logical step to take. One of the more neglected aspects of the game's combat is with its accuracy, but luckily this is in the player's favour. Any character can fire upon any enemy in sight, no matter how far away they are, and without obstructions and the most use of time units, the chance for a sniper to hit is most always in the 90s. No actual problems there, snipers are meant to be the most effective long-range attackers, however there is no trade-off for firing upon enemies in close quarters, so they are for the most part a little too over-useful, whereas the heavy weapons expert, whose main weapon is a big massive machine gun, is a little too slow and ineffective to warrant them a use other than when a rocket is needed. But to its credit, the game gets harder just as you are getting better, and continues on this path throughout. You'll become a lot more cautious when manoeuvring your team, making sure they are there to cover each other, and making sure people left out in the open are crouched. The zenith of any UFO crash landing is entering the downed ship itself, and you will probably adopt the same strategy I did by placing all of your units around the front door and getting your most useless one to go and play a game of knock-a-door run. These ships are more of an awkward end to a strategic battle, as they contain a number of aliens all hid behind cover with only one way in. Oddly enough, for the majority of times I took my shots at the aliens, the door to the ship shut after my turn, making their retaliation non-existent. As you fight your way into the ship, there will often be a 1x2 corridor to the cockpit, meaning you will have to squeeze your units through single file in order to take out the last one or two aliens that lurk in there. Although you could just throw in a grenade if you're not bothered about smashing up the scenery. Xenonauts not only aspires to take all the aspects from the original games that made them so enjoyable, it thankfully achieves them to a brilliant degree. The game can get really diverse, but it happens at such a perfect pace that you never feel like you have failed to keep up with how fast you should be progressing. And just when you think you might have been doing badly and are running out of money, a year will pass, rewarding you with a big wad of cash which is comparable in size to how well you have been defending the Earth. There are also enough objective-based scenarios to stop the ground combat from feeling like you are just going through the motions. Not all encounters are shot down UFOs, often you will get a street invasion where you must protect civilians, and as you unlock new equipment, such as the stun baton, you will have mission objectives to capture certain types of aliens for interrogation, which makes you completely change your battle strategy. My one big problem with Xenonauts, which I didn't have with Enemy Unknown, is that I never really felt connected to my characters. There needs to be more customization other than just their name, as the portraits really don't do it for me, so I became more aware of them as more of a group of stats and figures rather than a little army of alien slayers. Xenonauts is a faithful incarnation of the XCOM games it aspires to be. It's the kind of game that you turn off after an hour or so and it plays on your mind, having you return to it half an hour later. It's addictive, but in a good way. You never feel like you were just building new bases or collecting new items for your own megalomaniacal reasons, but because they are a means to an end. You need to give it a chance. First impressions are at the bottom of a ladder that it climbs quite rapidly, but once you have taken in the sights, read a few of the fantastically pleasing information segments that you get when you uncover a new item or alien, and taken in the fitting soundtrack, you will find yourself having one of the most immersive experiences in recent years. Thanks for watching, and as always leave a comment and get yourselves over to GOG.com to get yourself a copy.